Texas A&M has its new head men's baseball coach. How does it impact LSU? We're talking about it on bonus coverage of Locked on LSU. Let's get it.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Glad to have you aboard with us here for bonus coverage as Texas A&M has its new baseball coach. First reported by Brent Zwerneman of the Houston Chronicle, also confirmed by Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball. And it is a familiar name to Aggie fans and players. Michael Earley is going to be the new baseball coach at Texas A&M, according to those reports. In today's episode, I want to delve into who Michael Earley is and how that impacts LSU. And in part, this is important. Remember, in 2025, again, we're not a Texas A&M show, but in 2025, when Texas and Oklahoma come into the SEC for baseball, obviously the 24-25 season, the league is going to permanent opponents. You'll have two permanent opponents in baseball, and Texas A&M is one of LSU's permanent opponents. So what A&M is doing in baseball matters very much to LSU and for this baseball program. So yes, the fact that Michael Earley is the hire is something we have to talk about, not only what that means for the A&M program, but also for the 7 players that hit the transfer portal after Jim Schlossnagle left for the University of Texas. So we're going to delve into all that. As always, thank you for making us your first listen. So on your favorite podcast app, please subscribe where you are free, available wherever you get great podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. So please subscribe to the channel and smash that like button as well if you're here with us on YouTube. So let's delve into this process a little bit for Texas A&M and how they landed on Michael Earley. We know the process. Just this past Monday, Texas A&M lost the final game of the championship series to Tennessee. A day later, Jim Schlossnagle, it was reported, was leaving for the University of Texas. On Wednesday, he was introduced as the head coach at the University of Texas. So it was clearly a deal that was already done before the College World Series started, certainly before that championship series started, and we've started to get some of the pieces of the timeline. Schlossnagle took his entire staff with him to Texas. That included former LSU player and assistant Nolan Cain and Michael Earley. I would strongly encourage you, if you have the time or the interest, go back and listen to the episode we did that would have published on Thursday after Schlossnagle was introduced, and we looked at all of the 7 Texas A&M players that hit the transfer portal after Schlossnagle left. And I told you which ones I thought LSU had a chance on and which ones were likely going to follow Jim Schlossnagle to Texas. And two of the names that I mentioned that I thought, not my opinion, again, this I would say is an educated opinion. 2 of the players that I thought were going to follow were Gavin Grahovac, the third baseman, the freshman, SEC freshman of the year, and Jace Laviolette, the All-American outfielder with 29 homers. And the reason is because of Michael Earley. Mentioned it to you back on Wednesday and Thursday that Michael Earley was the reason. If you're not familiar with Michael Earley, came to Texas A&M from Arizona State, where he's the hitting coach. He has been at A&M or was at A&M for all 3 years there with Jim Schlossnagle as the hitting coach. And he's a guy who's from Indiana. He played professionally, was drafted by the Chicago White Sox, played from 2010 to 2015, then began his assistant coaching career at Arizona State in 2017. He was there from 2017 to 2021, and then went with Jim Schlossnagle to Texas A&M in 22, 23, and 24. And in 2024, Texas A&M set a program record for home runs in a season. So this is a very accomplished hitting coach and a guy that's also a very popular players coach. So when I look at the Michael Earley hire, it's very clear that what Trev Alberts, the AD at Texas A&M, is trying to do is keep this great roster together. More on that here in just a bit. But the process, as we've learned, some of the candidates and some of the names I heard initially as well were Tony Vitello. They would make the call. Skip Johnson at Oklahoma interviewed for this job as well. Tom Walter at Wake Forest is a name that Kendall Rogers reported also was interviewed for this job or was was talked to about the job. But ultimately, they landed on Michael Earley. One of the other names that I was told initially in the process was that there was a groundswell of player support for former LSU assistant and pitcher Nolan Cain, who was an A&M assistant, who, of course, Jason Laviolette was an LSU commit who flipped to A&M because of Nolan Cain. And there was a groundswell of support of players for Nolan Cain to get the job, but clearly the same was extended to Michael Earley, who maybe as a longer tenured assistant, maybe was, having had been an assistant at two different places, might have just been a little better fit at this point for Texas A&M. But essentially the same end to achieve, to say, let's try to keep this roster in place. So Michael Earley is going to be the head coach, and we'll see how they might piece that staff together around him. One of the other tidbits that I will tell you, Sunday morning I was told that the expectation is there will be a sitting Power 5, or I guess Power 4 now, head coach to join Michael Earley's staff. That is the expectation. So that way, while Earley does not have head coaching experience, the fact is they could, in theory, try to keep this roster together with the 7 players that entered the portal, maybe the guys that were looking at going to that were going to follow Jim Schlossnagle to Texas, like Grahovac and Laviolette, maybe guys that were not interested in following Schlossnagle, and we're going to look for a new spot, perhaps Texas A&M, their boosters, open up those NIL coffers and keep some of those guys that hit the portal back in College Station with Michael Earley, who again was a very player-friendly hire here. That certainly is the approach. You hire Early to keep the roster together. You bring in a sitting Power 5 head coach to try to have head coaching experience. I always question, though, whenever the popular hire, the player's coach, is the one that it's a very emotional hire, sort of rush to the podium. Look, we saw Ed Ogeron as an assistant who was promoted, although he had been a head coach before. Smoke Laval, who had been a head coach, obviously, but was the assistant that was promoted. This is an instance where it's more like, I would say, Barry Odom in football. You remember, obviously, there was Gary Pinkel was the longtime head coach at Missouri, and Barry Odom was the very popular defensive coordinator when Pinkel, because of health issues, very quickly and suddenly retired. They promoted Barry Odom from within, and that didn't have great results at Missouri. They fired Barry Odom, and ultimately now they've hired Eli Drinkwitz. We're going to see the same thing in football at Michigan, where Jim Harbaugh won a national championship, went off to the NFL. Sharon Moore, the offensive coordinator, now promoted, his first head coaching job. We'll see how that works, but that's not always a great recipe for success when you hire and promote the popular assistant, sort of to appease the players. You have to think about what you're doing that would be the best case for the program. I'll tell you, if the shoe was on the other foot, if LSU had a popular assistant coach in baseball and Jay Johnson left, I would not want LSU to promote the assistant, flatly. It's the same premise that I had when LSU hired Ed Ogeron. Like, your program is at a higher level, and you can do better. You can aim higher than promoting a total unknown. You have the resources to go hire a proven head coach. Go do that. So I think A&M is taking a massive risk here in promoting Michael Earley. Maybe it helps keep this roster together, but this is going to be a learn-on-the-job experience for him. And I would suggest that A&M, with their resources, isn't a learn-on-the-job type place, but that's clearly the route they're going. So how does this news affect LSU? I want to get to that, and we'll do that as we continue here on this bonus coverage of Locked on LSU, your team every day. I love telling you every single day about FanDuel, or every opportunity we have the opportunity to. And, you're here, you love sports as much as I do. We never want sports to stop. But the reality is, when we get into late June and July, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. We get fewer games. We're so grateful we got Major League Baseball right now. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every single day over at FanDuel all summer long. So get on and just start playing around on the app. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Locked On, and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. As a matter of fact, they even have the UFC. I was betting on UFC 303 on Saturday night. Paedo with a big second-round knockout or TKO. You can bet on your favorite sports right now at FanDuel. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Okay, so as we continue here, I did want to talk a bit about the impact on the LSU targets. So LSU did have a couple of visitors on campus this weekend. And by the way, we'll have a full episode for you Monday morning. We'll go through the whole weekend. A couple of LSU players have announced their transfer destinations, and Aiden Moffitt and Paxton Klink. So I'll have all that reaction. But this is a short bonus episode here. So two names that I told you about, Max Coffer, a catcher from Texas A&M, and Caden Kent, the infielder, were strong LSU targets and leans after Jim Schlossnagle left and they entered the transfer portal. It will be very interesting to see in the next 24 hours what happens with the 7 players from Texas A&M that entered the transfer portal when Jim Schlossnagle left. Remember, Texas A&M can pay as much in NIL as Texas can. So NIL deals won't be the issue. It's going to be a matter of, do players want to stay at A&M and play for Michael Earley? Do they want to go to Austin and play for Jim Schlossnagle and Nolan Cain? Or do they want to get a clean, fresh start somewhere else? One thing that I can tell you for certain is Caden Kent was not going to Austin. He was not going to go play for Jim Schlossnagle. There was no love lost there. I don't think he liked being benched by Jim Schlossnagle. And I also don't think NIL is going to be the kicker, because his dad, Jeff Kent, obviously made 9 figures during his playing career in Major League Baseball. So it will be interesting to see what happens with Caden Kent. But LSU is preparing for the possibility of maybe not landing Caden Kent, but also knowing they need bodies on the infield. And this weekend, Wyatt Hensler was at LSU. So Wyatt Hensler is from Penn, UPenn, and he entered the transfer portal because in the Ivy League they don't allow for a 5th year in the Ivy League. So Hensler has another year of eligibility, but wants to go play another season, can't play at Penn, so he entered the transfer portal. And so Wyatt Hensler is in the transfer portal and was visiting LSU this past weekend. He's 6'1", 215 pounds. He was the first team All Ivy League at third base in 2023, and he's a guy who's got a pretty good bat as well. In this season, in the 2024 season, he hit 360 with 20. Excuse me, I'm looking at it right here, with 22 home runs. So 360 hitter with 22 homers, and that's in the Ivy League, but he was All Ivy League at third base. And this would be a guy that would be, if you get him, right, depending on what happens with Caden Kent, you're trying to bolster your infield. You know, you've got Stephen Milam, you've got Gavin Grahovac, Brian Kucherak. You have Kucherak, Milam and Kucherak. You don't have Grahovac. Grahovac might well end up staying at A&M with Michael Earley. But Milam, Kucherak, you're going to add someone else here in the portal. If it is Hensler, if it's Caden Kent, we'll see what happens again at shortstop with Michael Braswell, if he ends up staying at LSU or if he ends up signing in the draft, how that all goes. But Jay Johnson knows he needs to add another veteran infielder, and it might just be Wyatt Hensler. We'll continue to keep an eye on Caden Kent as well to see if that's a guy who may end up. But again, we should start to get some of these answers here within the next 24 hours with the news of Michael Earley being hired as the Texas A&M head baseball coach. Okay, that'll do it for us here on this bonus coverage of Locked on LSU. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button and subscribe up to the YouTube channel as well. Let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you here every day, even bonus coverage on the weekends for Locked on LSU, your team every day.